Seth Rollins shocked the wrestling world when he aligned himself not just with Paul Heyman at WrestleMania, but then recruited none other than the future of the WWE, Braun Breaker, to this brand new faction. But I can't help but feel like this faction is incomplete and could benefit from the addition of another member. So in today's video, we'll be discussing just that. Who could be added to Seth Rollins' new faction? I'll give you 10 different options and I'll explain to you why I think they could make sense or maybe why they don't. And then, of course, in the comments section, you're going to be able to tell me who you think should be added to Seth Rollins' new faction. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, ring the bell for notifications. If you're a wrestling fan, I know that you're going to fall in love with his YouTube channel because we always upload daily wrestling content. And hey, don't forget, if you want more than just daily wrestling content, come over to the Patreon, patreon.com/SantiZap, where you're going to get so much more extra content that you will never get here on the YouTube. But that's enough. Let's jump into the video. So before we fully dive into this list of 10 names that I've come up with that could potentially be new recruits for Seth Rollins' new faction, I do think it's important to understand what the faction is currently made up of, because it'll tell us what the faction already has, which by default will tell us what the faction ultimately needs. So the faction, from an in-ring perspective, already has Braun Breaker and Seth Rollins, and as a mouthpiece / manager, we already have Paul Heyman playing that wise man role probably once again. But with Seth Rollins, we have a proven leader, somebody that has already gone to the promised land of the WrestleMania main event, somebody that could close out any WrestleMania, the main eventer, the first ballot Hall of Famer, and the de facto leader of this group. And then there's Braun Breaker, somebody that is very much the physical manifestation of the future that Seth Rollins says goes through him. So we have with Braun Breaker, the young guy that will eventually be the pillar of the WWE, the guy that will eventually be main eventing WrestleManias. He will eventually be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He is essentially Seth Rollins, but in his 20s and not yet in that main event caliber peak yet. So Seth Rollins' role is to mold Braun Breaker to ultimately become one of the top faces in the WWE. On top of that, Braun Breaker plays, well, Braun, not literal like his name Braun, but the fact that he's incredibly strong, scary, and fucking monstrous. He's the Braun of the group. So that means that with Heyman, we already got the brains, with Seth Rollins, we've got the leader, and with Braun Breaker, we have the strength and the brawn. So now we need to really analyze what this group ultimately needs. I think you can make the argument that the group needs maybe more charisma, or maybe it needs more likability, it needs more gift of gab, whatever it might be. Maybe it's agility, speed. Maybe you want to really kit this out like an RPG character as if this was Skyrim. Either way, I'm going to jump into the list of the people that I've got, and this is your opportunity in the comment section to destroy me or agree with me, whatever it might be. Go ahead, jump in the comments. The first one is, of course, Austin Theory. I think that this is probably the most popular option if you're really scouring online for these types of lists. He is the name that is being thrown out there by far the most. Part of the reason why people like Theory is the fact that he is incredibly talented and very young, and he very much does fit the mold as somebody that could be the future of the WWE, and as Seth Rollins stated, the future will go through him and no one else, and the future could very well be Austin Theory. The problem with Austin Theory right now is that, let's face it, he's kind of being treated like a joke. He's a member of A-Town Down Under. He's in a completely drowned and dead tag team division, and he just really has not been feeling or looking like the main event guy that the WWE could rely on down the line, which is kind of crazy to think about, considering before Triple H took over, that's very much how Austin Theory was being treated, the future of the WWE. This guy got catapulted to the moon with a United States Championship run, winning Money in the Bank, having a match, and beating John Cena at WrestleMania. So it is a situation of, oh, how the mighty have fallen. But I do think that it's that history of Seth Rollins seeing the fact that Austin Theory has fallen from grace, that he's just sort of floating around in the sea that is full of sharks that is the WWE, that could allow Seth Rollins to extend that hand to somebody like an Austin Theory to get him out of the ocean and really prop him up and really mold him into the main eventer that he was always meant to be, even though when he was initially set out to be a main eventer, he was never really properly tutored. And let's not forget, there is a history between Seth Rollins and Austin Theory. Austin Theory being part of the Monday Night Messiah group early on during the pandemic era. Now, in terms of like what he could add to the group, I don't don't really know what he adds. I guess he does add a little bit of that charisma. He does add a bit of likability into the group as well. A lot of people are comparing him to perhaps maybe like a young Randy Orton, who was also floating around in the WWE, not really doing anything of consequence, and then eventually being grabbed by Triple H and molded into the superstar of today. Maybe that's what ends up happening with Theory under the tutelage of Seth Rollins. I'm going to be honest, I really do like this option because it also gives us the opportunity for Austin Theory to turn his back on Grayson Waller, attack Grayson Waller, and ultimately just elevate himself in the process as well. Because a lot of us have just sort of had blinders on as to how Austin Theory is going to turn on Grayson Waller. So many of us think that it's going to be because of a babyface turn. What if it's because of an even bigger heel turn and then he joins Seth Rollins' faction? I do think that it's in play. I think it's a really strong option. Another popular option that's been thrown around is the better looking version of myself, one Ethan Page, who is currently down in NXT. If you don't know Ethan Page because you only watch the main roster of the WWE, fear not, you're going to be hearing about this guy very soon because this guy has been main roster ready since day one in NXT. This guy's done it all in the independents and spent several years in AEW and is one of the most complete assets that WWE has in developmental that could at any moment be called up to the main roster and fit in instantly. He's a good in-ring worker, ridiculously charismatic, very good in the ring, and still has a bright future ahead of him as well. One of the things that makes Ethan Page an interesting option is that he really has no ties at all to anyone in the group. He has no ties to Braun Breaker, no ties to Seth Rollins, and no ties to Paul Heyman as well. So he kind of goes into the group as a little bit of a blank slate, and so we'd be seeing new relationships being formed before our very eyes with Ethan Page and everyone else in this group. Funny enough, the one thing that makes him somebody that maybe doesn't necessarily fit the mold is the fact that he wasn't really born, bred, and raised in the WWE system. Granted, neither was Seth Rollins, but the bulk of his popularity certainly was made in the WWE, and Braun Breaker is a WWE product through and through. And some of Seth Rollins' biggest rivalries over the last couple years are with names that have gone to that other place, AEW, and made a name for themselves there as well, like CM Punk and Cody Rhodes. Now, the one difference is that those guys left WWE and went over there. Meanwhile, Ethan Page never left WWE. This is his first stint in the WWE. So that could prevent there from being any sort of bad blood with Seth Rollins and seemingly anybody and everybody that comes over from AEW. But if you are looking for a ready-made talent, somebody that can from day one grab the ball and run with it within this group and not feel like they're having to be propped up or you need to wait for them to catch up in any way, shape, or form, I feel like Ethan Page is a fantastic option. We mentioned that he's a blank slate with the likes of Seth Rollins, Braun Breaker, and Paul Heyman. He would also be a blank slate for a lot of fans as well. You got to remember, not everybody watches NXT or AEW. A lot of main roster fans literally just watch the main roster. So this is WWE's opportunity to immediately create an identity as a main event caliber player for Ethan Page on day one with the majority of fans. So in terms of this option, I gotta be honest with you, I also really like it. It's the reason why Ethan Page and Austin Theory are in the thumbnail of this video. Another intriguing option is somebody like a Trick Williams. I do feel like the Trick Williams positioning in this group is not really possible with the current timing and things that are going on in the WWE with Trick Williams. Listen, I might be entirely wrong. It's possible that Trick Williams does join this faction and he does double duty in the main roster in NXT, but now we're talking about triple duty because this guy just started a feud with TNA World Champion Joe Hendry, so now he's going to be appearing on the main roster if he joins this faction, on NXT and on TNA. That might be a little bit too much and spreading somebody like Trick Williams a little bit way too thin. I also think that Trick Williams would benefit from another year down in NXT, very similarly to how Braun Breaker kind of spent that extra year in NXT, not going for the World Heavyweight Championship, but more so building and developing his heel character, very much like somebody like Trick Williams is doing right now. In the past, we've had people from NXT get called up simply because they have nothing else to do in NXT anymore. And then when that happens, they don't really have anything creative or interesting for them on the main roster, and then they end up just sort of failing and more often than not getting released. I do feel like Trick Williams is going to be going down the path of Braun Breaker, where it isn't calling him up once he's done with everything in NXT, but more so calling him up when they know that he can be a really valuable asset to the main roster. That's what I think they're waiting for on Trick Williams. And there is still some time to continue to develop Trick Williams. In fact, enough time where I think that the faction storyline will develop so much to the point where it really doesn't make sense to add Trick Williams, because Trick Williams probably won't be on the main roster until really much further down the line. So if Trick Williams was a candidate to appear on the main roster like as early as Backlash, I would love this option, but it just really doesn't feel like that's the case considering all of the different duties that he has across NXT and TNA already. So although I like the option, I don't think that it's very likely. A name that is getting tossed around left, right, and center is Nathan Frasier. Nathan Frasier literally just debuted on the main roster. He's officially part of the SmackDown roster, and he came in as part of a tag team of Fraxium alongside his partner Axiom. So I don't think that right now it's in the cards for somebody like Nathan Frasier to join the group unless they're going to bring in both Axiom and Frasier, and that I really don't see. Now, if you're wondering, maybe you're only a individual that watches the main roster, why Nathan Frasier is so highly touted as an individual that could join this group, part of the main reason is that he's basically a really fast version of young Seth Rollins, because he basically wrestles exactly like young Seth Rollins before the knee injury, because he was trained in the school run by Seth Rollins. That really is like the connection. The fact that he trained out of Black and Brave, the wrestling school that is owned and operated by Seth Rollins, that is like the biggest tying factor as to why so many people have Nathan Frasier as a potential candidate for this group. But so far, what I'm seeing is that this just will not be the case, that Nathan Frasier is going to be on SmackDown. This faction appears to be staying on Monday Night Raw. That Nathan Frasier is going to be a tag team. This faction seems to be made of single stars. I just don't think that any of the contextual clues that we have fit at all. I also just don't see him fitting from like a personality perspective. I just don't think that he can play the role that we probably want this person to be able to play should they join the faction. I just don't feel like that's correct for Nathan Frasier. It just feels so out of character and might feel a little bit too forced. So I would just continue down the same route that they're already doing with Nathan Frasier. So I actually don't love this option. Another popular name that's being thrown around is Carmelo Hayes. And why not? Carmelo Hayes and Bron Breakker basically broke into the WWE at around the same time. They were the faces of NXT 2.0, NXT Rainbow, if you guys remember that. And they got called up to the main roster at around the same time. They were feuding for the NXT Championship for a long time. Carmelo Hayes came out on top after that feud ended. So it could make sense for Seth Rollins to just take on not just one of the pillars of NXT 2.0, but both of them and mold them and mentor them to being main eventers and have parallel careers to one another. I think that's very much on the table. However, I already see Carmelo Hayes being mentored, and in my opinion is being mentored very successfully on screen by The Miz. I love what they're doing with Carmelo Hayes and The Miz. Don't get me wrong, if Carmelo Hayes were to shift over to Raw and join this faction with this elevated stock significantly more than what The Miz can do, 1 trillion gajillion %. But at the very least, unlike somebody like Austin Theory, Carmelo Hayes has a track. Carmelo Hayes has a path that he's going under, and he has somebody that is going to be able to keep him on that track in The Miz. So I personally would love for the faction to add somebody that needs direction, not somebody that already has direction, and change their direction. Listen, Carmelo Hayes, in my opinion, is going to be a main player in the WWE for a long time, with or without the Seth Rollins faction. I already feel like he's well on his way to being a main eventer without the Seth Rollins faction. Is it going to take him a little bit longer than somebody like Bron Breakker? Yeah, it's going to take him a little bit longer, but that's fine. If he were to get added to the faction, I wouldn't hate it. I feel like there's better options out there than Carmelo Hayes, considering Carmelo Hayes is doing just fine. Ludwig Kaiser is a really fascinating option. Like, if you want to add a known commodity, somebody that you don't really need to mold into being a heel, Ludwig Kaiser is a fantastic option, and he looks like $1 million. I do believe, and I believe this for a long time, that Ludwig Kaiser, under the right mentorship and under the right guidance and writing, he could be one of the top heels in the WWE. And if this is what this group is forming, you know, a group of top heels in the WWE, or the top heel in the WWE molding future top heels in the WWE, then I think that Ludwig Kaiser is a fantastic addition here. And very much like that Austin Theory addition that I really like, Ludwig Kaiser is also somebody that isn't really going anywhere right now. He's just sort of spinning around in circles, and even missed WrestleMania, a point that was very much a storyline aspect that was being used to demonstrate his anger and why he was so upset with the system system and Adam Pearce, something that they might be able to play into should he be added to this faction with Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins could say, never again under me will you miss WrestleMania. I will guarantee that you are so undeniable that every WrestleMania you will be in the forefront of the conversation for matches. Adding Ludwig Kaiser would also just add a really interesting wrinkle considering Gunther is in the mix, Gunther being one of the top heels in the WWE. Maybe Gunther eventually feuds with this faction and Ludwig Kaiser is one of the people that he has to go through. And honestly, right now with Gunther being out of the equation, being suspended indefinitely, Ludwig Kaiser is truly and genuinely by himself. So being added to this faction would be such a lifeline for him in his career. And I don't just want to see it as a lifeline. Like, I really think that he would be a great addition to this group as well. I feel like he would really fit. Drew McIntyre is an option that I think is very interesting. A lot of people, and as I've shown you here, also myself, are thinking of the youngsters who could be added to the group, the 20-something-year-olds, the early 30s that can be added to this faction. And the reason why people jump to that is because they're trying to compare this group to Evolution, but what many of them don't recognize is that Batista was actually older than Triple H when Evolution started. So I don't necessarily just want to pigeonhole us to just young people that could be added to this faction that could be molded by Seth Rollins. What about a known commodity, a main eventer, a vet, a physical presence, a monster, somebody that's great on the mic in Drew McIntyre, who in recent months, at least really over the last year, has had some very similar motivations to that of Seth Rollins. And on top of that, Seth Rollins' biggest competitors with the creation of this faction are both CM Punk and Roman Reigns, the two people that Drew McIntyre hates the most. Last year, there were so many conversations happening about Seth Rollins and Drew McIntyre and Kevin Owens forming a faction of like the most professional haters of all time, but it could like actually come into fruition, and not only come into fruition, but like genuinely make sense. Drew McIntyre fits here really, really well. And look, eventually all great factions come to an end. They all have to implode, and an implosion between Seth Rollins and Drew McIntyre, well, to me, that just screams WrestleMania match right there. But the biggest reason why is just all of the similar motivations that Seth Rollins and Drew McIntyre have. I feel like that's just such a match made in heaven, and a match that so many of us have been fantasy booking for a really, really long time. So weirdly enough, I really like the addition of Drew McIntyre potentially in this group. Andrade is not necessarily the sexiest option, but again, if you want to talk about somebody that brings history and legacy to the business of professional wrestling, Andrade is absolutely one of those. Braun Breaker is a generational WWE talent that comes from a heritage of WWE talent in the Steiner family. Well, Andrade is also a legacy wrestler that comes from a generational family of professional wrestling, him himself being a third-generation wrestler. Now, I guess really that were to fit the mold better if they were recreating legacy, I guess. But hey, listen, if you want to use the fact that Braun Breaker is being added to this group because he emulates Randy Orton because he comes from a generation of wrestling family, then you got to consider Andrade as well. Again, I know that this isn't the sexiest option, but from an in-ring perspective, this guy would be so good. And all of his weaknesses would be masked within this group because he has both Paul Heyman and Seth Rollins there to be his mouthpiece to get him over with the crowd or get him heat with the crowd. But from the in-ring aspect of things, Andrade could just do his thing. He doesn't really need to talk. Really, this next person that gets added doesn't need to talk because we have the history of it working with Evolution themselves, which again, so many people compare this group to because Batista like never freaking talked in this group at all. However, this more than anything would just be a lifeline to Andrade's honestly struggling WWE return. I don't love this option, but if it were to happen, I would at the very minimum be intrigued. Sami Zayn is a name that I'm seeing pop up left, right, and center, but I don't really love this one or fully truly understand it. Sami Zayn, in my opinion, just doesn't make a heck of a whole lot of sense from the character that he plays. I feel like the only way that I could see it making sense is a world where Sami Zayn like truly just turns heel, and then maybe there I could see a fit. But even with a heel Sami Zayn, I can think of better things to do with Sami than just put him in this faction. Obviously, we know that he's been friends with Seth Rollins in the past before. He has problems with Roman Reigns, obviously, and big problems with CM Punk recently. So he kind of fits the mold from that regard, but his hatred for those two is nowhere near as close to the hatred that Drew McIntyre has for those guys. So I don't really have a lot to say here. I really just included him because I see it a a lot in my comment section, but somebody has to explain this one to me. I don't get the desire for Sami Zayn to be in this group. And the last name that I see a lot on the internet is Big Bronson Reed, somebody who is on the precipice of coming back from injury, somebody who could make his big triumphant return, helping Seth Rollins and Braun Breaker, or maybe beat CM Punk and Roman Reigns in a tag match. The return of Bronson Reed would be perfect here. That would be a lot of bronze in this faction. Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed, but hey, whatever, man. Seth Rollins is just collecting bronze, I guess. There would be a little bit of, I guess if you want to call it, hypocrisy from Seth Rollins recruiting Big Bronson Reed, considering him and Big Bronson Reed had that giant feud last summer that culminated in Seth Rollins costing him that big last monster standing match. So there is hatred there to be had, but maybe hatred that can be bypassed. I think one of the reasons why he doesn't fit is because they already kind of have the muscle in Braun Breaker, and just adding another big, scary, muscular dude, I don't think is the right fit here. I feel like they need to find somebody else with a different moveset, different body type, a different aura about him than just somebody that can just wreck things, because they already got the dude that can wreck things. I feel like Big Bronson Reed would be just fine not being part of this faction, and technically isn't this dude technically part of the bloodline already? I don't know. I don't love this option. I'm happy to hear why somebody might think that he's a great option or a great addition, but I just don't think he's a great fit considering what the group already has. All right, folks, we'll leave it there. Ultimately, my favorite pick here are the first two, Ethan Page or Austin Theory, but I'm open to hear all of your ideas. Please leave them down in the comments below. Let's have a conversation, but that's it. I'm done. Get out of here.